Right. I want to talk to you about how to try and have more effective conversations with your teams, your reports and the rest of your organization and the customers as well. This is sometimes something that engineering, developer folk are stereotyped as not being particularly good at, shall we say. And it's something I certainly fouled up completely the first time I went into management. I very strongly remember how going into management felt. You too, good. For me, that first time, it was very much the Peter principle in full effect. I'd gone from kind of IC to team lead to kind of a directory type thing in very few years. I was kind of fully moved to my level of incompetence in the company. And I did terribly. I made bad management decisions, I made bad hiring decisions, I made bad firing decisions, I made bad lack of firing decisions, because nobody really helped me understand what management was. And probably, to some extent, I really hadn't worked with many good managers myself. I hadn't been managed well myself. And I think my biggest problem at the time, and a problem I've seen that others have, is this stereotype that management is all about telling people what to do. As developers, we're used to having our focus be the product that we build. That's where our attention is. So our attention is on the product, and our attention is occasionally on the customers who use our product. And we bring that to management. We bring that idea of our job is to do that, so we need to tell people to build the product and tell people to kind of talk to our customers and make us happy. The problem is that I think is a very broken model of what the manager's job is. The manager's job is to build the organization, not the product. Your customers as a manager, the people you're trying to make happy, are the people in your organization. Your team, your reports, your managers, your bosses. It's all about the people, and the stereotype is that engineering folk suck at people, which is sad. Fortunately, we have a bunch of other disciplines, kind of ethnography, user researchers, who spend all of their time trying to figure out people, and we can steal some of their practices with relatively little effort to help us get better at some of the human communication stuff we have to do day to day as managers. Take one-on-ones. Hopefully, we're all doing one-on-ones. Though I still get kind of surprised the number of places and clients that I have where I go look at how people are working and that's not happening. But one of your core skills as a leader should be the ability to have effective conversations with your team. And you need to understand their problems, understand their goals. And if we have that model that those people are our customers, as it were, they're the people who are using the organization that we help build, then UX folk have a word for those conversations. It's called research. We're there to discover the problems that they have so we can better build the product, our organization, to fulfill our report's needs. And the thing is, people mess up those conversations all the time. And we can steal some of the practices from the user research world to make those conversations work better. So, how do people foul them up? This is the biggest. Not listening. There's phrases you'll hear a lot, things like active listening, being present, paying attention to what somebody else is saying. And that sounds simple and obvious, but I see people mess this up all the time, so I'm going to simplify it slightly. Stop talking. And this sounds obvious, but we're not used to that in normal conversation. in normal conversation, we're not listening. We're listening until the point we hear something interesting, and they go, oh, I'm going to say that to that. And then at that point, you're waiting for them to shut up so you can say the thing, and you're not listening anymore. We are socialized in normal conversation to be poor listeners because we listen to the point where we hear something interesting, and then we wait for the gap to say our interesting thing. We get our little kind of dopamine buzzes by that feedback and exchange and the rapid fire of things. So kind of we moved out of listening. People naturally talk in paragraphs with pauses. There are gaps in conversation which we listen for and think, I'm allowed to talk now. It's giving permission when you stop to allow someone to talk onwards. And when you hear that in a one-on-one, shut up. Because the gap sounds longer to you as a listener than it does to the person who's speaking. They're potentially using that time to think about what they want to say next. And you hear more. People will naturally fill gaps. If there is no noise, people will carry on talking. A simple, dumb trick that I still do all the time is when someone stops talking, I go kind of 1 Mississippi, in my head, obviously. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi. Just wait 4 or 5 seconds consciously, and people will often carry on talking. They'll talk about the next thing, or they'll talk about the underlying problem that caused the thing that they just talked about. Stay quiet. The next big mistake that I see is people not listening to what was actually said. In the sense that you hear the words, but reinterpret them slightly in your head. You hear Mary talking about this TDD problem that she had with the QA group as being the QA group need to get better at being TDD. Whereas what Mary might have been saying was the people in the QA group are assholes. You don't know without digging more. You have to pay attention to the words used and then use them back. It's a technique that UX folk call reflective questions. This is an awesome question. Can you tell me more about blah, where blah is something that the person has actually said in that conversation, the same words they used. So, can you tell me more about the TDD problems with the QA group, or whatever? And this is really useful for three different reasons. One, it actually shows that you're paying attention, because you're using the same words back. 2, it allows you to dive deeper into a topic and double check that you have actually understood what they mean by it. You're using the word back, and then, the QA group, we have the test suite, but they're kind of ignoring the test suite and running their own checklists as well, and, you get more information. And it's also really useful to redirect the conversation. If Mary carries on talking and somehow you've got onto the conversation of, I don't know, her cat's favorite food or something, and while it's interesting, it's not relevant to the conversation, you can bring it back. Well, that's really interesting. Can you tell me more about the QA problems that you were having? And you could redirect, again, you're showing respect, you're paying attention, you're using their own words back, and you're redirecting the conversation back to the problematical areas that you want to explore. And it's a hugely useful tool. Every clarification that comes out of that will breed more questions that you can scribble down and dig into in more detail. The other classic mistake is asking about the future. What would you do if this thing happens? And this is something that people are really leery of in the user research, product development world, because users lie. Or not lie, but they imagine. They imagine this world and the thing that they will do. Would you pay $50 for this product? Yes, that would be awesome. But when they're comparing the $50 to that product in real life to kind of, buying a couple of DVDs or a nice meal out, they might choose the nice meal out instead. Because it's really, people suck at imagining futures and how they react in the future. So, asking people questions like, would it be better if? Or, will another $5,000 a month make you happy? Or whatever. The answer you hear isn't likely to be a useful one. Looking into the crystal ball hardly ever works. What you could do instead, and what we do in the product world as well, is you ask for stories. You don't ask, if you're building a product to get appointment reminders, you don't ask would a product that gives you appointment reminders be really useful to you? You ask questions like, can you tell me, say it's a hairdressing salon or whatever, can you tell me about a really bad day for you? What happens on your worst days? And if it's like a load of missed appointments, then you know that there are some kind of problems. And again, you can ask really good questions for reports. What was the best day last week? What was the worst day last week? Start asking for stories, and you'll get much more relevant and direct information back to you. Leading questions. These are really bad in user research because they're the kind of things that get you to build the product that no one wants. Would you really like an appointment reminder system? Yes, of course I would. You've just told me what the answer should be. And it's even worse when you're in a management position, because if you're out being a user researcher or doing customer development, you're just, a random person on the street. When you're a manager, you are in an explicit power relationship with your reports. So if they hear anything that sounds like direction, they're much more likely to think that's something you want them to do. To ask open questions instead. Don't say, do you think the QA needs more training in TDD? Say, what do you think would help with TDD? Or with QA, rather. How would you see this progressing? Can you tell me more about the problems with QA? All these sorts of things are much more likely to give you useful information than telling people the answer. This should be an obvious one. Don't be an arse. And the reason I stick it in there is people are, well, I hope most people here are rarely deliberately an arse. But people don't see your whole day, especially often when you're in a leadership or management role. You're not with those people all the time. You have spent the morning dealing with some ghastly disaster about HR and recruitment, and you get to your 3 one-on-ones at the end of the day, and you are thoroughly pissed off. And people will see that sometimes if you're not paying attention. If you get to the 4th one-on-one of the day and you're hearing the same problem that 3 other people have raised, you can look a little bit bored because you've heard this problem before and you want them to get on to something that you don't know is a problem. Pay attention to that because people see that in you and they don't know that you've heard the problem 3 times. They know that you look bored. So, always remember to be polite. Don't be scary. Don't look pissed off. Don't look angry. Make sure that you have set the expectations around the relationship correctly, especially when you're meeting people for the first time. I'm a complete cuddle bunny. honest. But I'm also a 6'1", 100 and too many, 145 kilo beardy scary man. Okay? And if it's someone's first interaction with me, they don't know what I'm like. I could be a complete arse. You know? Many people are. So pay extra attention to that first encounter. Pay extra attention on good manners and introducing yourself properly and listening and shutting up and asking for stories and all those sorts of things. And remember your body language. Not pay attention to the other person's body language, but remember yours. Because mostly, people write a lot about interpreting body language and, leaning this way and nodding that way means such and so forth. And sometimes it can. Sometimes leaning back can be a sign of disinterest. And sometimes leaning back can be, I've spent 2.5 hours on the train yesterday and my back is not well. Body language is something that it's very easy to misinterpret on both sides. So again, don't look bored. Have eye contact. Lean forward and pay attention. Kind of do some slight mirroring of what the other person's doing. If you can't do that kind of stuff naturally, just try a little bit of copying what the other person does. So you can start getting a little bit of a rapport, and you're making sure that your body language isn't being read as you're annoyed with them or bored with them. Trusting your memory is the other thing. I have so many times in my life gone, wow, that's really important. I must remember to act on that thing. And 3 hours later, all I have in my head is, there was some really important thing that I needed to do. Or in my notebook, there is kind of ACT, exclamation mark, underlined 3 times. And the next day I'm going, what the hell does ACT mean? So, write up your notes. During the conversation, during the meeting, write down the things that you want to bring up later. Use that as a driver for the things you need to mention later on. After the meeting, write up all your notes in a way that you'll be able to understand in 24 hours' time, or a week's time, or a month's time. Because otherwise you've wasted the stuff that you've learned. It will just disappear into the ether, and you might feel good about talking to people, but unless you're bringing away actions and insights and things to do, it's just waste. And on that topic, try and separate insights and observations. And by that I mean insights are kind of the conclusions that you've drawn from what people have said. QA is not understanding TD very much. And what people have actually said, which might be, I'm having these problems with QA. Because if you just write down QA having problems with TDD, then you might miss out another underlying reason, because that person might not have actually said that. They might have said having problems with QA, or I'm having problems with QA about TDD. And this is not an entirely hypothetical example, but I had a team where 3 engineers were having problems with QA, and 3 other engineers were not having problems with QA. There was a strong gender split between the group that were having problems with QA and the group that was not having problems with QA. Because it turns out one person in QA was a complete git. And soon after left the organization. But the thing is, the problems that were raised were not the lead in QA as a sexist git. The problems that were raised were around, A testing being ignored, some problems with them not understanding TDD, with them ignoring errors that they found because they weren't on a checklist. Different problems, and if you write down those things alone, and the things to act along those things alone, you'd have missed out on the underlying cause. You need to dig deeper. You need to understand the root causes. You need to separate the conclusions you draw off the top of your head with the conclusions you draw after you've got a wider breadth of information. So, that was me blathering for a while. What can we learn from this overall? The stereotypical leadership idea is around this kind of accumulation of power from the top, kind of telling people what to do, and that filtering down the train. And that attitude to change and understanding problems and fixing problems doesn't work very well in my experience. I have a little mantra when I'm talking about product development around kind of building products and understanding customer needs. And that's stalk before you talk, before you sell, before you build. And what I mean by that is you should kind of stalk your customers, go look at them, understand their problems first. And after you've looked at the situation in the market and understood things a little bit more, then you go talk to them to dig into those problems in more detail. Then you start selling a solution to see if it actually fills their need. You know, start talking about products and prototypes and stuff like that. And then at the end, you start building and doing stuff once you've understood the needs and validated that those needs exist. And this is very much the same way I think about building the organization and building management problems. Stalk first. Go look at what people are doing. Understand the process. See how people are working. Then follow up with one-on-ones and other kinds of meeting where you're understanding people's problems in more depth and listening to them in more depth. Then start talking about solutions, not implementing them straight off, seeing if those are likely to fulfill those needs, and then start getting people to do stuff. It's right at the end, because we don't want to be Mr. Burns. Mr. Management is not telling people what to do because, you know, you're the boss. But the other anti-pattern I think developers fall into is kind of being more like Batman. It's like they think they're a hero, they think they have like the best idea, oh, I'm the best engineer, so I'm gonna help people do this. It's not your job to jump in as soon as you see a problem. Your job is to not have all the answers. Your job is to find out where the problems are and help people solve them themselves. So don't be Batman, be Alfred. Alfred, you know, is the one who helps Batman do his job, you know. Understand the Wonder Women and Batmen of your teams and help them be better at their jobs. Be the Alfred for your team. Robert Greenleaf talked about a style of leadership called servant leadership in the 70s. And this is how he talked about the difference between the more traditional top-down style and servant leadership. Do those served grow? Do they become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, and more likely themselves to become servants? Servants in this context being servant leaders. So can you help your team by talking to them more and understanding them more? Yes. And there's lots of useful things we can steal from the user research world, the ethnography world, even the therapy world on talking to people more effectively. There's a couple of good books for further reading, if you so wish. These are both written from a kind of user research perspective, but there's tons of really good, useful concrete advice about getting the most information from people in a really effective way. And I'd especially recommend Inda Young's Practical Empathy, because that's got tons of really good information about turning empathy from a kind of wishy-washy term into something that's useful in that context. And I think that's more, her book's probably a little bit more applicable to talking to people in a managerial concept. And if reading books is too much effort, just try and remember these 5 things. First, shut up. Do not talk, especially as soon as the person has stopped talking. So after you've shut up, stay quiet. Count to 4 in your head. Think about the laundry list or whatever. Give yourself something to do while the other person is gathering their thoughts and talking more. Reflect back what they said. Listen to the words that they used and use those same words back at them to both double check that you heard what they said, because sometimes people say the wrong words. It helps you dive deeper into the conversation, and it helps you redirect the conversation back to something useful if it's gone off track. And ask for stories, because stories are often the most informative way of getting a lot of information. If you're interested in building applications for, I don't know, finding a better holiday, if you ask very direct questions about that, what would you like in an app to find holidays better? You're going to get very weird and judgmental answers. You ask questions like, what was your best holiday experience? Tell me the story of your best vacation ever, right from the point where you chose it. Then you're going to get a really interesting story with tons of rich information that if you just shut up and reflect things back, you're going to get an enormous amount of information, often stuff that you would never have thought to ask about if you didn't ask for a big general story. And finally, remember to separate your insights from your observations. The things that people actually say versus the conclusions that you draw from the things that people said. Because if you jump to insights too quickly, you will often miss stuff, especially stuff that you hear from multiple people. You will solve one person's problem, and you'll solve another person's problem, and then you'll solve another person's problem, but you will miss the underlying cause for all 3 of those people having difficulties. So, shut up, stay shut up, reflect back what you hear, ask for stories, and separate insights and observations. And hopefully, you'll have more interesting conversations and useful conversations with your team. Thanks.